Welcome to Hector Tarot, where the reader is bubbly, but the readings can get dark. So today I am going to be working on Gemini's 2026 reading. I'm slowly but surely making my way through the zodiac. I took this weekend to just rest because being chronically ill and trying to function like a normal person working a 9 to 5 is tough. So I'm doing what I can. Please be patient with me. All right, let's do this. Gemini 2026. Okay. Overarching energy for 2026. You got two cards. One of them is the Ace of Swords and the Hierophant. Nice. That is a strong pair for 2026. Isn't Mercury going in Gemini? Or no, Uranus is going in Gemini. Ooh, okay. January. What do we got for January? Strength. February. Six of Swords. March. Father of Cups. April. Wow. Okay. No, I'm putting this back because 4 is too many. April. Okay. They were like, okay, fine. How about 2? So we got Justice in the reverse and the 7 of Pentacles. Or, yeah, the 7 of Pentacles. May. This initially jumped out upright, so I'm going to acknowledge that. The Sun. June. Mother of Swords. And the Ace of Pentacles. Something about the Mother of Swords popping up kind of made me feel like the Ace of Swords overarching energy is something that you're going to grow into. Casper. Where were we? July. Four of Swords. August. The Hermit. September. Three of Wands in reverse. October. Ten of Swords. November. The Empress. And the Five of Swords in reverse. December. How are we going to close 2026 out? Seven of Cups in reverse. Nice. Three of Pentacles in reverse and the Five of Cups. All right, now that we've got all that on the table, let's go ahead and pull some alchemy cards for the quarters. First quarter, we've got Venus. Second quarter, we've got Chiron. Third quarter, we've got the androgyne or the androgyny. And for the last quarter, we've got darkening. Interesting. Okay, starting with Venus. Pleasure, eros, beauty. With the arrival of Venus, the senses open as if for the first time. It is the planet of pleasure, of touch, of sensual delights. Venus is often depicted as romance or eroticism between people, but it can also be experienced as an all out love affair with Mother Nature herself. Aphrodite emerging from the ocean is a classic example of Venus imagery, as is Cupid with his bow. No matter how old or jaded you are, when this card appears, it's a sign that attraction is at an all time high. The laboratory is alight with love. You may be in love with the work, the materials, with another person, or with the world itself. Seeing beauty in small moments is a sign Venus is in balance, an obligatory reminder that pleasure and pain are usually found intertwined. Gemini, for January through March, you're going from strength to the Father of Cups. And in February, we see the Six of Swords, which is the rainbow after the storm, recovery. So I feel like I need to ask, where in your life do you feel like you're being stronger than you really are? Or it's like you're pretending that you need less than you do. You're acting as if you can go without. It's not really quite self-sacrifice. It's not even really a facade, because it's the feeling that I'm getting is it's not about how other people see you. It's not that you're acting for the sake of others, it's an internal thing. Internally, there's a part of you that maybe bit more than you can chew and don't want to admit that to yourself. Because the Six of Swords to the Father of Cups, this transition, it feels like a softening to me. Because strength isn't necessarily kind of, about like stubbornness. It's not a negative card at all. But sometimes when we try to act stronger than we are, we do that so that we don't give up. We do that so that we can survive what we're going through. And that doesn't come out of pride. It's not ego. It's not an act that you're putting on for other people. It's kind of that internal push, but it feels like you're pushing yourself when what you need is to pause. Um, in Japan, we have a phrase, whips and candy. And what that means is, to know when you need to use the whip versus when you need to use the candy, punishment versus reward. And right now, it feels like you're punishing yourself, but you can't punish yourself into accomplishment. You can't punish yourself into achievement. You can't punish yourself into healing. Sometimes a little bit, it's part of the process, a little bit of the process, but it's not the whole process. At some point you have to remember to love yourself through it too. You need to know when to use the whip versus the candy. And I think you might remember that in March. Like being chronically ill, I push myself way too hard often. And even something as simple as the room renovation that I was doing for a week put me down for weeks. I have a bad flare up going on, and I don't look like it because I've been showing up to work every day because I have to. But when it's something like that, people are like, well, duh, rest. But when it's a mental thing, or like when it's about hustling, to get to a goal, people start yelling, hustle, hustle harder, keep going. And they think they're being encouraging, but it's not encouraging to someone that's already pushing themselves too hard. Sometimes people in that position, what they really need to hear is just a soft, remember to take care of yourself. Remember to rest when you need to. Rest isn't something that you earn after you're done. You can take your time. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Okay, going into the second quarter. Chiron. Wounds, teachings, paradoxes. Chiron is a cosmic enigma. In Greek mythology, he is said to be the rejected son of Saturn, who, through the pain of abandonment, becomes a great teacher and healer. Such is the paradoxical nature of this minor planet. It demonstrates that our pain is a great resource. It will guide us to our deepest purpose if we are able to observe it slowly, gently, and with support. When the Chiron card appears, know that you are being called to deepen the work, to delve into tender parts of yourself that require patience and forgiveness. Victim mentality will get you nowhere. Your past blaming. It's time to let your painful experiences serve as a beacon of light to others. Chiron reminds us of where we've been and where that allows us to go. So, as I was saying, with the needing to be tender with yourself, needing to be kinder to yourself, needing to be more loving with yourself. In April, we have Justice in the reverse and the Seven of Pentacles. this feels to me like, I think it was yesterday. Yesterday morning, I woke up and I just felt the urge to put up a TikTok video of just me talking, and I never do that. It's usually just clips from my YouTube that I post on there. But I felt the urge to talk about what I've learned almost dying. And a big part of it was that we can assign meaning to our own lives however we want to. That meaning, that purpose, is something that we decide for ourselves. It's not something that's given to us. And a lot of us, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to find purpose, or we expect to be given a purpose. But in that yearning for an answer from a higher power, we forget we forget our own autonomy. We forget that we are the ones steering our ships. We are not powerless to a higher power. I believe, personally, and this might offend a lot of people, I believe we are the higher power. A lot of people, they want to sit there and wait for a hero to come. They want to sit there and wait for a better president, for a better partner, for someone that'll love all their wounds back together. We wait for someone to save us, but we are not helpless. We pray to a higher power while forgetting our own divinity. But people don't like to hear that. It offends a lot of people because that also means accountability. That also means that wherever you steer your life is where you're going to land. And when you land where you land, you have no one to blame but yourself. And this is coming from someone who's been rocked around by life. There's another video on here somewhere that describes a lot of it. Not in too much detail, but I am a strong believer in personal empowerment because religion has taught a lot of people, programmed deeply a lot of people, that being human is wrong, that divinity is outside of us, that we are disgusting, vile creatures that need to pray to another creature for forgiveness for existing. A lot of religions teach that, whether it's overt or covert. And so a lot of us have strayed from religion. We've chosen the path less walked to emancipate ourselves from that belief system that teaches us that we are powerless in our own lives. And yet, I see so many in the spiritual community acting exactly the same. They've just turned it into yet another dogma, yet another thing that makes people feel ashamed for being human, yet another thing that places the power outside of ourselves, whether this be other deities or crystals, tools, mantras. And I absolutely borrow help from crystals, but I also understand that all I really need, if we're talking need versus want, all I really need is me. So basically, what I'm getting at here is that you can change your mind at any time about what you want to do with your life. You can quit everything just because it doesn't feel right anymore and start again. But a lot of people are afraid to do that. A lot of people are afraid to do that because all fear is based in unknowing, and we are afraid of what we don't know. We are afraid in uncertainty, and a blank slate is uncertain and scary. But I have found in my experience that when the slate is wiped clean, when everything has been taken from you and you have nothing left, those were the most liberating moments in my life. Those were the moments in which I got to sit and decide and dream and go, now what do I want to do? What do I want to do next? At one point, I have always wanted to work at a deli. I've always wanted to cut ham because I stand there watching them do it and it looks so fun. And so after I came out of brain surgery, I had a job that I really loved. It was really fulfilling, but it was physically strenuous. And I kept getting injured on the job. And I was going through another health scare and I had to quit. And then I went, now what? So I went and worked at a deli for a little while, just for a few months. And I enjoyed it. I decided it was something that I wanted to try. And then I thought about doing janitorial work next because I've always also wanted to be a janitor. I love cleaning. It's okay to explore life like that. And mind you, I'm an Ivy League grad, but I always wanted to try janitorial work and working at a deli because life is meant to be explored. It's meant to be played with. It's the freedom of existence, it's the freedom of autonomy. Again, it's scary because you're steering your own ship, and you're accountable for yourself, and there's no one else to blame. But at the same time, you can go anywhere and do anything. And that's what I'm feeling here in April, a blank slate. Justice in reverse tells me it was an unfair situation, something didn't end well. But then you go into the Seven of Pentacles, and that's the what do I do now? That's the period of contemplation. The sun coming up in May tells me that you're going to pursue something that actually makes you happy. I also just heard a weird phrase. Someone said colored differently. It's almost like what I also noticed that the color schemes here are kind of bland, even with the Father of Cups. But the sun sticks out. And not just because it's the sun, it's because of where it's placed. I'm also noticing how the sun and the middle of the Ace of Pentacles look similar. And that's telling me that in May, it's like you pick a direction, and by June, you're slowly but surely planting the seed to make it a reality. Also, notice how the Ace of Pentacles is a cut tree. That tree was cut, and I'm envisioning like a small sapling popping back out the middle of this tree. And that reminds me to tell you that everything you've done, everything that you've accomplished, everything that you've worked for and achieved up until this point isn't for naught. No, whenever I was sitting there with nothing left to lose, thinking, okay, what do I want to do next? I brought my wisdom with me. Because, see, as you experience things, you gain more tools in your tool belt, and those tools never leave you. And that's the point. Life isn't about what it looks like, it's about what it feels like. It's about who you are and who you become through it. Because the Mother of Swords here is also about discernment. That's a tool that we gain through pain. Chiron in this quarter, a lot of this also feels like shedding of pressure. It's like you're dropping the pressure that you had on yourself to appear a certain way, not just to others, but also to yourself. But those parts of you, they needed love. They needed to be acknowledged, not silenced. The androgyny, creative transcendence, multiplicity, the artist. The androgyny is a deeply revered image in alchemy. Born of Hermes and Aphrodite, Hermaphroditos has been classically depicted as a balanced union of divine masculine, the sun, and divine feminine, the moon. Yet today's alchemist knows the androgyny is far more nuanced than that. It encompasses the infinite spectrum and reveals itself in ever changing non binary forms. The divine Hermaphrodite defies definition as it is a deeply personal felt experience. Accessing this fluid and enlightened state requires us to slip into the contradictory realm of the senses. Breath by breath, we are drawn into our limbs, our fluids, our orifices, organs, and cells. We let go of rules and labels. Judgment is suspended. The gods are present, as are the creative mysteries of the underworld. For a brief moment, we hold all of our complexities in one loving form. Like a newborn, we know not our name, gender, age, or location. We are the embodied artist embraced unconditionally by sun and moon. There were a lot of things running through my mind as I was reading that. One is that I remember learning in my first, actually, psychology class that personalities aren't real. That was the conclusion of the class. The whole class was about how personalities develop, nature versus nurture type stuff. And in the end, they said actually it's both, and there's a third thing that is neither, an essence that we are born with. I think that we as humans are more intangible than we like to think because, fun fact, discrimination, biases, stereotyping, all of that is how people protect themselves from their brain's own fear response. It is the amygdala that reacts in the face of people of other um, races, ethnicities, genders, sexes, sexual orientations. It's fear that triggers the response of hate. The hate is also rooted in fear. When people say that they hate snakes, they don't really hate snakes, they're just afraid of them. And I remember when I was a kid and I would go to like the toy store with my mom, I always thought how weird it was just how pink the girls' toy section was. And it's all like baby dolls and like fake little plastic kitchens and stuff, and it's all teaching girls how to do makeup, do hair, take care of a baby when they're still a baby. How to be a housewife basically. Whereas the boys section had cars and dinosaurs and action figures, and I always thought it was so weird how segregated the two were. Luckily, I grew up with a mother that let me pick out whatever I wanted, and what I wanted was usually like a microscope, or like one of those little geology kits, or arts and craft kits. That's usually what I went for. Science and art, those were always my thing. And so I didn't really grow up with that. Well, I guess from my father's side I did. I basically had it embedded into my brain that I had to be a perfect housewife, so pressure to learn how to cook and clean and all that stuff. But then I grew up and I taught myself how to do woodworking. I grew up and I taught myself how to sew, how to cook, how to do all the things that I got interested in, regardless of who it was for. And I always thought it was really, really weird when the other girls in school would be like, "You can't do that. That's for boys." And I'm just like, "What do you mean?" But basically, what I'm getting at, going on this random tangent about my childhood of, I guess, kind of growing up non binary ish. Because in my brain, it's kind of like, yeah, I'm a woman, and what does that have to do with me? Maybe I am non binary. I'm having some kind of weird revelation here right now. Anyway, um, this feels like the experience of being hard to define. And the thing is, from my experience, when people can't define you, sometimes they have very violent reactions. Sometimes they hate you. And that's because they can't fit you into a box in their brain. But those boxes that they create in their brain, those stereotypes and biases, that's for their safety. That's for them to feel safe around you. If they know how to compartmentalize you, it makes you feel safer to be around for them. And when they can't do that with you, they don't like you. But this feels more like stepping into this energy knowing that. Because with the Four of Swords and the Hermit popping up in July and August, and then the Three of Wands in the reverse, this feels like an everything stops kind of moment. This feels like a deep turning inward kind of moment. This feels like you go through the process of needing a minute to find yourself. It's almost like you go into it thinking you're going to find yourself, and then you come out of it thinking, kind of giving up on defining yourself. Because what does finding yourself even really mean? Sometimes people put themselves in those boxes to make themselves feel safe too. Because even when it's not real, feeling like you belong somewhere, even if you don't fit all the way, feels safer than standing alone. There are a lot of people that are Republicans that can't admit that sometimes they actually think the Democrats make sense. Or they become Democrats that can't admit that sometimes they think the Republicans make sense. Or they can't admit that they're a Christian that sometimes questions the Bible. Or they can't admit that, they're goth but really, really like cutesy, colorful things. It's kind of like we put ourselves in these boxes. Like when you join high school and they start separating into cliques, what happens to the ones that don't fit in any of them? But even within the cliques, they're full of people that are hiding aspects of themselves for the sake of belonging. But the question isn't, what does your life look like? What have you accomplished? It's, how do you feel about yourself? Before you ask whether or not anyone likes you, do you like you? Do you sleep well at night? That's integrity. Integrity is keeping the promises that no one heard us make. Showing up authentically is integrity. Damn the consequences. Because between the Hermit and the Three of Wands in reverse, I know it's the Three of Wands in reverse, but for whatever reason, this feels like a blossoming into something completely else. This feels like going inward, hoping that you could find answers, and then coming out okay with the fact that you couldn't find any. That maybe the answer is tomorrow. Maybe the answer is nothing. Maybe the answer is whatever you want it to be. Going into the last of next year, October, November, December. This is where things get deeper. And here we have the darkening. Depth, readiness, churning. In alchemy, darkness is an achievement. It indicates the material has been through a significant occurrence, sometimes called an initiatory experience, that has brought it into a state of readiness for the work. The darkness prepares us. We've moved beyond the small talk and chit chat of the upper world and descended into the psychic layers of the soul. We admit who we are fully and bravely, and thus open ourselves to the process of transformation. And I swear to you, I don't remember the definitions of all of these cards. But is this not exactly what I was just talking about? When this card appears, it's not necessary to delve into what brought you here, the initiation, likely by fire, that has caused the embers to char. Rather, it's time to heal, and darkness is the remedy. Closing your eyes is a voluntary expression of darkening. By practicing it daily, we drop into the depths and surrender. As the alchemist's eye adjusts, transformation begins. Huh, I'm getting chills. The Ten of Swords in October concerned me a little bit when I initially saw it, but this feels like a good ending. I feel like the Death card in tarot, it's about transformation, deep transformation, and death. It feels like the scariest thing, right? Everybody fears death. But there's an element to that card that feels hopeful and peaceful. The Ten of Swords is brutal. That is a brutal ending. The Ten of Swords is violent, destructive, painful. But look what comes after. The Five of Swords in reverse, the end to self destructive tendencies, and the Empress. The Empress is all four queens. This feels like through an ending, the closing of a chapter that very much is or was painful to you, is the period, as in the end of a sentence period. That's the complete annihilation of the self. And from that, you become something that transcends definition. The way I see the Empress, she is all of the things and nothing all at once. And that is what it is to be infinity. This is someone who has figured out that all you really need to do is be authentic. If you're sad, cry. If you're happy, laugh. If you're angry, say so. And another thing that's coming to mind is that is exactly how you clear all of your chakras. I get some questions in my inbox sometimes. What are some I need help with my throat chakra. And I'm like, then say something. Say what you need to say. Do what you need to do. They're hoping for crystal recommendations. They're hoping for a Reiki appointment and I tell them no. I can do Reiki on you, but the effects will be temporary unless you practice the things that you need to practice to keep your chakras moving. But the cure for a blocked throat chakra is to say the thing that's hard to say, to speak up for yourself. And it takes practice, definitely. I was just telling somebody the other day that I wasn't always this outspoken. I was mute. I was literally mute for a few years. My voice used to shake just putting in an order at McDonald's. I was terrified of everything and everyone because I went through a lot. But you know what I used to do when there was something difficult that I needed to tell someone? I used to write it into a letter and I used to read it to them. Timing was off, sure. Conversation was long over. It was a weird time to bring it up, and it's a weird way to execute it. But I got the point across. It's that kind of courage that is needed to heal yourself because the nervous system doesn't heal from sitting in a therapist's chair. That's part of the healing, it's an important part of the healing. But that only heals your mind. You heal your nervous system by doing. You heal your nervous system by repeatedly putting yourself through the things that terrify you and coming out okay. And you learn to walk this earth with certainty in yourself. You can walk into any room with confidence because you know, because you've seen from experience that you got you. That's who the Empress is. I thought it was interesting because I saw somebody talking the other day about how each queen, she believes, is the culmination of different stories. Queen of Wands has it kind of rough. It ends with the Ten of Wands, a lot of working hard and a lot of victories and failures and turmoil, fights, conflict. Queen of Swords had it brutal. The swords ends with the Ten of Swords. There isn't much happiness in the sword suit, actually. And then you've got the Queen of Cups. It's a bit softer of an energy, light heartbreak, maybe. And you got the Pentacles, loss, gain, loss, gain. As you go through each story, you wind up with the Queen with those characteristics, everything that she's learned from going through what she's been through. So, who does the Empress become? How do you define the Empress, who is supposed to be all four queens rolled into one? You end this year in grief, but it's the sacred kind of grief. Seven of Cups in reverse tells me that the illusion broke. You see things very clearly now. Three of Pentacles in reverse, no plans, nothing, not sure where to go. You're in that middle point where it's just vast space around you, and you can go anywhere and do anything. And that's terrifying. Five of Cups is loss, grief. They call it the crying over spilled milk card, and a lot of readers kind of like to be like, oh, get over it. But for me, the Five of Cups is actually the most painful card in the deck because that's regret. That is mourning. And you're still at the Five of Cups. Yeah, that's another thing to think about. You lost 1 cup, 2 cups, 3 cups, 4 cups. You lost 5 cups. You're on the fifth card of the suit. But it feels so heavy because it was an almost. It feels so heavy because you didn't just lose what you lost the dreams associated with it. You lost the hope that you had. You lost your glimmer. Kind of like a new love. You start to fall for someone and you start to imagine all the things that you'd love to do for them, that you'd love to do together. There's a fantasy involved and it starts to grow. And when it ends prematurely, it's a grief that somehow hits harder than ending something with someone that you've been with for years because it didn't go on long enough for you to unveil the mysteries, unveil the possibilities, hit the limitations. What you lost was an endless string of possibility and hope. That's the Five of Cups to me. And in December, it feels like as you've grown into the Empress, as you've grown through that year, you are simultaneously grieving a life that you can never go back to again. I mentioned this in the Taurus reading, but it's like a goldfish. People say that they grow to the size of the tank when in reality it's the tank that's stunting them. And stunted growth is not good for their organs. Goldfish are meant to live 20, 50 years, not 2 years, like most people think. But when you give a goldfish the space to grow to its full potential, it will, and it'll never fit in your 10-gallon tank again. And there's a grief associated with that. When you've outgrown the things that brought you comfort, when you've outgrown everything that was familiar, and you've outgrown the things that you love, that is pain. Outgrowing something that you love, because there's a part of you that wants to act like the growth never happened and like you'd be completely satisfied just being with them or in that line of work or whatever it is. But you know deep down that if you do that, it'll never feel right. And you will always feel like you're in a tank that's too small for you. I also feel compelled to talk about this. I used to have two fancy goldfish in a 55-gallon tank. They had plenty of space. They grew to about this big, the size of a grapefruit. And then someone decided that they wanted me to take their goldfish in, so I took them in. Now I had four goldfish that size, or no, four goldfish. Two were mine, the grapefruit size one, and then two of them were smaller, but then they kind of grew bigger because now they're in a larger tank than what they were in. And so I could not keep up with the water. I couldn't keep it clean. So I decided, yes, I'm disabled, but I'm going to go out back and I'm going to move a bunch of cinder blocks around and I'm going to dig a deep hole and I'm going to make them a 900-gallon pond. And so I did that. And they were so happy in there that they made a bunch of babies. So I wound up with 90 something goldfish babies. And I asked the pet store, I was like, hey, can you take these? Can you like resell these or something? And he was like, oh, they're just going to have to be feeders because, legalities and stuff. Um, and I didn't want that for them. They're my grand goldfish. So I ended up digging yet another pond in the front. I spent all summer out there getting eaten alive by mosquitoes in the scorching heat. And I'm disabled. So I can't use a shovel. I was using a hand scoop, and I scooped out a 1,300 gallon pond for my grand goldfish. And then that turned into a turtle pond. Long story. Anyway, but the point is, when you are loved correctly, you don't have to live in that tank. They'll dig a pond for you. When you're in the right place, you don't have to shrink. You don't have to stunt your own growth. You don't have to hold yourself back. There's room for all of you. That's how you know you're in the right place or with the right person. When there is room for all of you. So grieve in December next year. Grieve everything that you've outgrown and lost, because it is a legitimate loss. You know, a lot of people talk about growth as if it's this whole like forward movement only, rah rah kind of thing. But growth is painful too, because sometimes we love the things that we outgrew. Sometimes we love the things that we can't be with, because being with them means that there is no room for ourselves. And it's okay to grieve that. The overarching energy is the Ace of Swords and the Hierophant. This is going to be a deeply spiritual year for you. Oh, and a thought that I didn't finish earlier. Yeah. So, what I believe spirituality to be is the recognition of divinity within ourselves. It is an individual path. It is not something that we're all meant to agree on the same thing. It goes differently for everyone. It works differently for everyone. Everyone comes out differently, because it's about authenticity. The peak of spirituality is unapologetic authenticity. And what reminded me of that thought is that the Ace of Swords is about sudden truths. The Hierophant is about higher wisdom, deeper knowledge. Or was it higher knowledge, deeper wisdom? Or did I just say that backwards? Anyway, but you see how there's lightning in both of these cards. That tells me that next year is going to be a rapid growth spurt for you. You wanted to find yourself. You will, and more. Well, if you liked what you saw here today, please feel free to like, share, comment, and hit the notification bell so that you get notified every time I post a video. And I'll see you in the next one.